Imagine Florence in the 1490s. Art, music, luxury, and culture. It was the very breath of the city. But one day, everything changed. Bonfires rose in the streets, and people threw their books, mirrors, and musical instruments into the flames with their own hands. Leading this chaos was neither a king nor a commander. He was a friar, Girolamo Savonarola. Savonarola claimed to be God's messenger, calling Florence a city of sin. He professed to foresee the future and shook the entire city with his fiery sermons. His vanity bonfires, massive public burnings, shocked all of Europe. Soon he openly challenged the Medici family, toppled the government, and became the de facto ruler of Florence, if only for a short time. But his power didn't last. Pope Alexander VI accused him of heresy, and Savonarola met his end not in the bonfires he created, but in an even more terrible blaze, executed in the heart of Florence. With his death, an era came to an end. Yet his name still lives on in history, straddling the line between fear and awe. Fact 1. Birthplace and family background. Girolamo Savonarola was born on September 21, 1452, in the northern Italian city of Ferrara. At that time, Ferrara was a highly active city in terms of culture, science, and politics, flourishing under the patronage of the Este family. The city where Savonarola took his first breath reflected both the glimmer of the Renaissance and the power struggles among Italian states. Savonarola's family had both intellectual and noble roots. His father, Niccolò Savonarola, was considered one of the most learned physicians of his time, with expertise in natural medicine, anatomy, and philosophy, earning him great respect in Ferrara. He was known as a cultured man who wanted his children to receive a high-level education. His mother, Elena Bonaccorsi, came from an ancient and influential noble family. The Bonaccorsi lineage played an important role in Ferrara's political and social life. Elena was described as a woman with strong religious and moral values who had a profound impact on Girolamo's spiritual formation during his early years. Girolamo grew up in a large family of about 7 children. His childhood environment was filled with scientific books, religious texts, philosophical discussions, and aristocratic influence, forming the foundation of his early life. Ironically, it was this very wealthy, worldly, and intellectual environment that also planted the idea in him that the world is deeply corrupt, which would later shape his radical religious outlook. Fact 2. Decision to join the monastery and family's reaction. From a young age, Girolamo Savonarola showed deep religious interest and spiritual concern. By around age 15, he had lost interest in worldly pleasures and wished to dedicate himself entirely to God. At this time, his family, especially his father, Niccolò, tried to understand his decision, but were initially very worried. Savonarola wanted to completely separate himself from his family's wealthy and intellectually oriented environment, and for him, this was a personal and spiritual mission. Joining the monastery put both his social status and future prospects at risk, yet he prioritized what he saw as a divine calling. Ultimately, Girolamo entered the monastery without his family's full consent, but while maintaining their respect, and there he began to formulate his radical religious ideas. This decision became a turning point in his life and laid the foundation for the powerful sermons and influence he would later wield in Florence. Fact 3. Vanity Bonfires, burning of art and material pleasures. After arriving in Florence, Girolamo Savonarola saw the city drowning in sin and launched a radical campaign. He considered not only political corruption, but also the moral decay in culture and the arts to be sinful. For this reason, starting in 1497, he organized the famous Vanity Bonfires, massive public burnings of luxurious and worldly items. The items thrown into the flames included books adorned with excessive wealth, musical instruments, paintings, mirrors, jewelry, and luxurious clothing. The goal was not merely to destroy material possessions. Savonarola sought to cleanse the souls of the people. Even famous artists, such as Sandro Botticelli, under his influence, reportedly threw some of their own works into the bonfires. These bonfires caused shock and fear throughout Florence, while simultaneously strengthening Savonarola's power and influence in the city. Each bonfire served both as a moral lesson and a tool of religious control, While these actions cemented his image as a radical religious leader, they also stirred mixed emotions among the citizens, both fear and admiration. Fact 4. Challenge to the Medici family and political rise. As Girolamo Savonarola quickly gained fame in Florence for his religious sermons, the city's most powerful family, the Medici, became his main target. The Medici had ruled Florence for centuries, holding both economic and political power. Savonarola condemned them as sinners and rebellious against God, openly criticizing their corruption and luxurious lifestyles. In 1494, during the march of King Charles VIII of France into Italy, Savonarola encouraged the Medici family to leave Florence, temporarily bringing the city under his influence. His charismatic speeches and ability to mobilize crowds effectively turned Florence into a center of religious dictatorship. Savonarola was not only a religious leader, he also gained political power, shaping the city's laws and social life according to his ideals. Alcohol, adultery, luxury clothing, and entertainment were banned, and moral police patrols were organized in the streets. Thus, the friar not only preached religion, but also took control of Florence's social and political order. This period marked the height of his power in Florence, but it also drew the attention of his enemies. As Savonarola's influence grew, both the Medici family and the Roman papacy began to take serious action against him. Fact 5. Girolamo Savonarola and his deep religious faith. Savonarola's entire life was built upon deep religious conviction. From childhood, he believed in placing God's will above everything else and saw the world as drowning in sin. When he preached in Florence, his sermons were not merely political messages. They were meant to encourage spiritual purification and remind people of their responsibilities before God. His faith also served as the foundation for his radical actions, burning books and artworks in bonfires, destroying luxury items, and banning alcohol and adultery in the city, all seen by Savonarola as rituals of cleansing from sin. Even when he knew his death was approaching, he did not waver in his faith, believing he was right before God, even under torture. For him, saving the city was not only a political or social mission, but a spiritual one. Thus, Girolamo Savonarola's actions and sermons were entirely motivated by his religious beliefs, which formed the core of his influence in Florence and his enduring historical legacy. Fact 6. Confrontation with the Pope and religious bans. As Savonarola's influence grew through his religious sermons in Florence, it caught the attention of the Roman papacy. Starting in 1495, Pope Alexander VI began issuing warnings against him, accusing him of spreading heresy in his sermons. Savonarola, however, remained faithful to his beliefs, rejecting the warnings and continuing his preaching, confident that he was righteous before God. The bans imposed by the Pope became both a test and a religious trial for Savonarola. Because of his faith, he faced the threat of disarmament, suspension from preaching, and exile from Florence, yet he prioritized delivering his religious message to the city and its people over personal safety. This confrontation subjected him not only to political pressure, but also to spiritual trials, cementing his position in Florentine history as a figure surrounded by both fear and admiration. For Savonarola, faith was above all else, guiding every decision and action he took. Fact 7. Moral police and religious control in the streets. In Florence, Savonarola did not control the people only through his sermons, but also through direct supervision of behavior in the streets. He established a moral police composed of young clerics and organized groups. These patrols monitored the city, reporting people's sinful actions, including alcohol, adultery, luxury clothing, entertainment, and gambling. For Savonarola, this system was not just about punishment. It was meant to practically convey a religious and moral message to the people. The street-based religious control completely altered the daily lives of the citizens. People were now forced to watch their behavior in public spaces. The moral police served both as a tool of fear and discipline. Some street patrols even labeled those who did not participate in Savonarola's sermons and bonfires as sinners, subjecting them to public shaming and sometimes physical punishment. In this way, Savonarola ruled Florence not only through words, but also through practical and physical religious control, shaping the city into a form of religious dictatorship. Fact 8. Turning against the people and criticism. Initially, the people of Florence viewed Girolamo Savonarola as a holy prophet. His sermons and bonfires revealed the city's sins and had a powerful effect on spiritual purification. However, over time, this influence stirred mixed emotions. Savonarola's strict bans, bonfires, and moral police began to displease parts of the population. While burning luxury items and artwork seemed a moral lesson to some, for others it represented lost wealth and cultural heritage. Each bonfire affected daily life, business, and social activities, limiting them severely. As the religious dictatorship and social control continued, some citizens began to oppose him. People grew tired of the sermons and bonfires, thinking, the friar has become too much of a dictator. Wealthy and influential families especially could not accept Savonarola's power and harsh rules. Additionally, economic difficulties in Florence increased public resentment. The items burned in the bonfires and strict social regulations placed both moral and material burdens on the poor and middle class. Thus, a man once seen as a prophet became, for some, a fearful and coercive leader. His radical religious ideals and strict measures inspired both admiration and hatred, turning public opinion against him and setting the stage for his eventual execution. Fact 9. Confession under torture and confrontation with critics. Girolamo Savonarola's growing power and influence in Florence increasingly alarmed the Roman papacy. From 1497, Pope Alexander VI labeled his sermons as heresy and issued warnings. However, Savonarola remained faithful to his beliefs and continued preaching. During this period, both political and religious pressures against him, supported by the papacy, intensified. In 1498, Savonarola and his close followers were arrested. The charges were related to his religious and political positions: heresy, misleading the people, and opposing papal authority. Savonarola initially tried to defend himself, but the torture tested him severely. Under this pressure, he was forced to confess. Though this confession did not fully represent a renunciation of his beliefs, it was also a result of physical and mental coercion. At this stage, Savonarola faced both religious and political critics. While a portion of the Florentine population remained loyal, many had turned against him and supported the papacy. His confession under torture represented both a personal trauma and the legal basis for his subsequent execution. This period marked the decline of his power in Florence. Despite maintaining his faith and mission, the torture and social pressures placed him in a situation he could no longer control. Fact 10. Execution and historical legacy. By April 1498, Girolamo Savonarola had become politically and religiously isolated in Florence. A portion of the population had turned against him. Papal pressures had intensified, and his close followers had been imprisoned. Although he had confessed under torture, he never renounced his faith. On April 30th, 1498, Savonarola was crucified in the center of Florence and then burned on a pyre. His ashes were scattered into the Arno River, erasing his physical presence from the city entirely. His execution was both a warning and a symbolic message. Radical religious leaders and those opposing the papacy would be punished. After his death, the Medici family soon returned, restoring Florence's previous political and social structure. However, his ideals, sermons, and radical acts like the Vanity Bonfires left a lasting mark on European history. He is remembered as an example of religious radicalism, social influence, and in political leadership. Girolamo Savonarola left a historical imprint not only in Florence, but throughout Europe, as a symbol of devout faith and radical religious activism. His life and death tell a unique story about the delicate balance between religious conviction and political social influence. Savonarola's fire may have gone out, but his legacy still burns in history. If you enjoyed this journey through Florence's dramatic past, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more incredible historical stories.